Hello, Lucas here, and today I want to present you this. This is the Helios 42, which is an 85mm f1.5 lens that you may have heard about before because it has a gorgeous, really amazing bokeh. And I will also compare it a little bit to this. This is the Cyclops H3T1, which I reviewed earlier, which is more or less the same lens, but from the Russian military. Long story short, let's get going and look at its lenses. So this is it, the original Helios lens. And the reason why I have this in my hands is because my girlfriend, who bought the Cyclops lens earlier, which is also maybe a few years ago now, was really pleased with the aesthetical results from the Cyclops lens, but not too much with the technical quality in terms of sharpness, detail and flaring. So this is the reason why we bought the Helios lens. The cool thing about the Helios lens is this is not really a vintage lens. You can pick it up in a vintage style or in vintage condition, but these lenses still get produced in the Russian Federation directly. So you can just import it directly from Russia, completely new, and with guarantee and everything. I don't know which mounts they make. They make, of course, the Canon mount that I have here. And of course, you can also get it for Nikon, but from there you can adapt it to nearly anything. So one of these options is actually a pretty good choice. So the most obvious difference between these two lenses is that the Helios has an aperture, an actual aperture. And as you can see, the shape of the aperture is actually pretty nice. It's a bit of a star-shaped, so this is pretty neat. As you can see also, the aperture is on top of the lens and the focusing part is on the back of the lens, which is facing the camera. This can be a bit confusing from time to time because you may confuse these two. Talking about the focus ring, you have these little notches in the focus ring. So this is great for grip with your hand, but it's not too perfect if you want to use this lens with a follow focus. We still have to talk about the aperture because it actually consists of two rings and it can be a bit strange if you're not used to it. I have no idea how this way of an aperture is called in the English language. However, we have two rings. The one that I pulled earlier, the big one, this one, closes the aperture in the end. And we have a second one on the top, where the numbers are written on it, as you can see here. The basic idea is that when we only twist this ring, nothing happens. You only can set it to the value that you assign before. So for example, let's say we set it to f4. We want to shoot at f4. So now nothing happened. I twisted the ring, nothing happens. But now I can twist the actual aperture, but only to this value, not further, then it's stuck. The idea behind this is a fully manual approach. So basically, you would set your aperture to f4, you want to shoot at f4, but when you shoot with an analog camera, you don't have that much light in your viewfinder if you set it to f4 in an instant. So basically, you would just look through it at full aperture, wide open, so you have enough light, you can focus your lens. So now you see I confused both rings. And then you just close the aperture, take your photo and can go on. And some other lenses of the M42 mount, there were like an automatic with a little pin in the rear of the lens. This is not possible with this lens. So this is a fully manual approach. And it's not too bad because the cool thing about this is, as you can see here, the upper ring is clicked and will just get to the values written on here, but the lower ring that you set the actual aperture, which is declicked. So basically you have a very smooth aperture if you need to, which is pretty nice for filmmaking. When I reviewed the Cyclops lens earlier, I admitted jokingly that this lens is built like a tank because, well, it's from the night vision goggles of the Russian military and because it simply is built like a tank, fully covered in steel and pretty nice to look at in a military sense. Now the funny thing is that the original Helios lens is actually heavier, and as you also can see, it's bigger than the military Cyclops lens, which is not much of a difference in the end. It's around 100 grams or so. Not too bad, but funny in the end. From the pure aesthetical standpoint, these lenses are more or less the same. So the bokeh range is the same and so on and so forth. Of course, there's a difference in sharpness because of the coating and the aperture and such. And one thing they also differ though, aside from the aperture of course, is the close focus distance. The Cyclops can focus up to 1 meter, which isn't too bad for a lens with this focal range. So you have to get your object 1 meter away from you to be able to focus to it, which is fine, but also a bit far away obviously. So the Helios is much improved in this regard, and you can focus as close as 70 centimeters. So around 30 centimeters difference between these two lenses, which is 1 foot for the American crowd. And it's very interesting, especially for portrait photography. What's interesting to note is that the Helios is wide open already much sharper than the Cyclops that cannot be stepped down. Now if we step down the Helios even further, we can witness a drastic improvement in the overall sharpness. Especially the edges can benefit a lot from stepping down the lens, as they are pretty horrific wide open, yet totally usable stepped down. The drawback of stepping down is that we immediately lose the twirly bokeh effect that this lens delivers. Even one step down at f2, we can see the effect decreasing. Still, we are left with the star-shaped bokeh, which is interesting in its own regard and can lead to other interesting bokeh effects. The one thing we still have to talk about though is the name of these lenses, because I referred to them wrong the whole time. So when I originally reviewed the Cyclops lens, I called it the Cyclops H3T-1, which is what is written on the device. The problem with this is that it is a Russian lens, so it is the Cyrillic alphabet. So basically it doesn't mean H3T-1, it means originally Cyclops NZT-1. This is the correct name of this lens, or the whole device, the night vision goggles. It's Cyclops NZT-1. Now with the Latin alphabet we would call it the Helios lens, the Helios 40-2. Now Russian is a bit different, so it actually would be pronounced Helios 40-2, or whatever 40-2 means in Russian. So basically also the Helios is not what it seems to be. So we end up with the Cyclops NZT-1 and the Helios 40-2. To add insult to injury now, I still will refer to this one as Cyclops H3T-1 and this one as Helios 40-2. The reason behind it is that I simply have my major audience in the US and Europe, sadly not in Russia. I think it would be just confusing in the long term if we really forced to call these by their real names. Still, I wanted to clarify this because I think it's an important part of history and also because of language. And the more you know. When I ordered the Cyclops lens originally, it was around 94 euros, including the night vision device, which is pretty nice. And I think since then, and also maybe because of my review, the prices went up the hill, and I'm sorry for that. This lens, the Helios, the original one, is around 360 euros, I think. So the difference might not be too much after all between these two. And if you can afford it, I would clearly recommend the Helios because of the better quality, the built-in aperture, which is always handy. And also, of course, the close focus in this thing, and so on and so forth. So if you can afford it, get the original. If you can find a sweet deal on this lens, of course, directly buy it because it's really worth it. So we are at the end of the video. I thank you very much for watching. I wish you a very good day. And because this is my first video in 2016, I wish you a very great, awesome year. And this is my phone. I have to pick that. I think it's important. See you next time. Bye.